Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, which sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. And today with me is Adam Riggs, the CEO of Frameable. I will talk about what the company is, but before we get into that, Adam, tell me a little bit about how you see the evolution of collaboration having proceeded from the beginning of the pandemic to this point, and then how you see it proceeding going forward in terms of collaboration in remote spaces.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I think at the beginning of the pandemic, collaboration was, it was something that, there was an emergency and everyone had a lot of new problems to solve. And I think that collaboration in that time started with, let's continue to do the things that we know how to do. Let's rely on the tools that we're already familiar with while we start to solve this new and growing set of problems that are specifically related to this moment. So what I mean by that is people had video meeting software in and around their workflow, in their company. They relied on that. People had shared documents, shared document programs, and possibly whiteboarding program around, and they relied on those. So they were not necessarily looking to upgrade these tools to better tools because they had so many new problems. They really just, I think, wanted to focus on the new problems, and all of the existing tooling that they were somewhat familiar with, that they might have relied on in a much lighter weight way, they just considered that their new tool set to rely on so that they could focus on the new stuff. As the pandemic has gone on, and we've all been reading the papers, a lot of new dynamics are in play. People are tired of working in isolation. I think that's one of the most difficult things about working remotely for many people, is that it feels somewhat isolating. Sure. You don't see your colleagues in person, obviously. You don't see them remotely through the video screen unless you're working in a meeting together or in a pairing session together. So it does feel lonely sometimes. You feel disconnected from the larger organization. You don't have as many or any opportunities to bump into people the way you would in a physical office. So I think that the tools that we started with in 2020, they did a good job of helping us get through a difficult period. And for most people, it was a totally new set of circumstances. But as time went on, and up until this point, that we are now, we really find ourselves frustrated with some of the byproducts of those tools, or some of the emergent properties of what it means, what it's like to work every day with those tools as the primary tools. And now I think people are focused on trying to, find a better path. And for some people, the better path means a hybrid strategy, now that that's possible. Maybe I'm going to go to work a few days a week now that that's possible, and then I'm going to have some deep work opportunities at home, maybe a few meetings at home, but for the most part, I'll be able to divide my week that way. I think that's one approach. Another approach is to try and find tools that just do a better job in some of these ways than the ones that we started with.
That makes a lot of sense. And I helped 21 companies transition to hybrid and remote work and kind of figuring out their future. And what I find is that the most important thing that people really don't like to do is go to the office and do the same old things that they were doing at home, because they're going through the pain of the commute. That's an hour there, an hour back, putting on fancy clothing, uncomfortable clothing, having a set desk lunch, having unhealthy snacks. So there's a lot of problems with going to the office, especially if you end up doing the same things. So what I work on with my clients to do is to try to do as many things at home as possible, and then come to the office only for more intense collaborative things and or social bonding. So it usually ends up being no more than a day a week. That's the kind of usual rate for what my clients find comfortable. And so I'm curious what you've seen in your work with companies with trying to minimize the amount of time in the office by trying to do things that can be done at home at home?
So I think that the universe of things that can be done well and consistently well at home is growing. I mean, as people get more comfortable working from home, and as the tools that support remote work get more, become more robust and satisfying to use, I think it's true that the number of things that you can do well from home is growing compared to the way it was in say April or May 2020.
And so tell us a little bit more about what your company does to help these tools. So I know that's kind of the space that you're in. Share a little bit more about your background and your company.
Of course. So Frameable is a new company started in late 2020, early 2021, and our focus is on video enabled or video forward, but I'm not saying video required. Video forward tools that really support natural interactions, online. The software is delivered in the browser. There are no downloads, and the way the product started off was it was an event product. So everybody had video software to have meetings in, like we are doing right now, but one thing that was missing was a more fun, a lighter weight, sort of nicer to look at, better aesthetics, meeting opportunity for social events, right? So we built a product called Social Hour that started off as just a mingling, a piece of software that made it really easy to move around from group to group and mingle in a lightweight way. And that has evolved into a full-blown event product with a stage layout and sort of a hybrid layout, which combines stages with rooms. So we now have a full-blown virtual event software product, which is called Frameable Events. And what we found ourselves doing during the pandemic was intentionally misusing or appropriating our own software, but instead of using it like event software, like the event software it was designed to be, because an event has a beginning and an end, and it has a run of show or an agenda of some kind. I mean, that defines an event. Whereas a virtual office product needs to be always available. So persistent virtual space. So we started using our own event product, but instead of using it just for an hour at a time or something like that, like for happy hours, for example, the way many of our clients did, we started setting the beginning time of the event as the morning and the end time of the event as the end of the day. And basically we spent all day in the software because that made it that was a lot more pleasant than moving between video meetings that were totally discrete. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure, that makes sense. I would wonder, does that make people feel always on? Is that a challenge with it? Tell me a little bit more about it. I would wonder if, I can imagine that it can make some people feel that way.
Yeah, so the answer is, I mean, my preamble to the answer is that it's a perfectly legitimate question or like soft objection. And we hear it sometimes from clients who have the same concern. And the response is that it would be uncomfortable if the people using the software didn't have quite a lot of choice about how much information they shared. So in other words, you don't have to work with your camera on if you don't want to. You don't have to make yourself available, to be interrupted if you don't want to. But what's really powerful about our software is that we give the user the ability to transmit what they're doing, to transmit whether or not they're open to being interrupted or not.
Okay.
Of course, the user gets to decide if their camera is on or not. So you can use our software and have it be completely a private experience where your colleagues can see that you're in the office, but they also see that you're not available to them. And that's very similar to what it's like to work in a physical office. I mean, when you go to a physical office, you don't have the choice of being invisible, really. I mean,
Sure.
you know, you walk in, people see you walk in, they see you get coffee, they see, you know, with some exceptions, they, you know, certain kinds of offices no, but for the most part, they can see through windows and glass walls, maybe who you're with and things like that. And this actually serves a purpose, a very important positive, has a very important positive effect on the colleagues in the office, because you know, as humans, we take in a lot of information through our eyes. So having that contextual vector, that peripheral vision, giving me information about what Gleb is doing today and what John is doing today, you know, or are they in or not in, and who have they been working with, and things like that. I mean, even this level of information helps build trust on teams. And this is one of the reasons why people have missed the office. Is it's not because they missed the commute, obviously, as you pointed out. It's because it's very natural for us to use the information that we're taking in peripherally in our decision making. So to not take in any of that information, which is, you know, what happens when you're working from home, like you are and like I am, for most people, when you're working from home, you're only interacting with and you're only getting information from the people that are on your schedule. And that's not normal. I mean, it's normal to have a busy schedule, but it's not normal for there to be zero information about what any of the other people on your team are doing unless they're on your schedule. So what we've done is we've said an office environment is a lot like an event. An office environment is not a meeting where it's just you and the person you're meeting with, or I'm working alone. An office environment is a space that supports a wide variety of interaction types. Events that were scheduled a long time ago, meetings that were scheduled a long time ago, meetings that were scheduled yesterday, collisions where you bump into someone in the hallway or getting a coffee. I mean, there's so many different kinds of interactions that are supported by a physical office that are not supported just by meeting software. So what our software does is it makes it possible for someone who's working remotely to experience that full spectrum.
Okay, that's interesting. One of the techniques I teach my clients to do is called virtual co-working, where everyone signs into, let's say, a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams call, and they can leave their camera on and off, but they turn their microphones off and they leave their speakers on. And then they work on their individual projects. So they start by sharing what they're going to be working on, and then they work on their individual projects. But if they have a question, they can turn on the microphone and ask, and then they can discuss, problem solve, whatever. It's especially helpful for junior team members, but it's helpful for everyone, because at the end of the time, they all turn on their cameras and microphones and say what they did. And so it's kind of a mutual bonding experience, a collaborative experience. And so there's some similarities to what you're saying. One of the things that I hear from clients is that they do feel a little bit more drained in that experience than they would if they were working solely alone. So and there's the question of, you know, the typical phrase of Zoom burnout. So I'm curious if you're getting a little bit of that burnout because of that feeling of being connected. What are your clients saying about that?
Yeah, so I would hypothesize that the reason why people, first of all, what you described is knowing that people were trying things like what you described was part of what validated for us that there would be that this product would be well received, because you have people who are, you know, basically hacking together something that doesn't really exist as a fully formed product because they want or need or would benefit from, in, you know, in the eyes of their colleagues or boss, more connectivity. So the fact that people were trying to do it the way you describe is very encouraging to us. Now, I think the reason why, if I was going to hypothesize as to why people had that reaction to what you suggested, my hypothesis would turn on, again, what you described was not visual.
Mhm.
And so people know that they're connected. And in the case of your example, that it sounds like the audio was on, so you could sort of hear, things. If somebody wanted to come in and talk to you, it would be like somewhat surprising to you because you have no visual cues.
Mhm.
But you know, you can walk through the world and hear very little that's actionable, but what you see is always going to help you form a better contextual, better peripheral understanding of
Hmm.
your environment. It's always actionable. Even if the right thing to do is take no action, it's still information. That's why
Mhm.
the science says that when you drive a car, you make something like 60 decisions per minute, they say, to keep the car safe. I mean, the speed is fine. The speed is, fine before another car enters my field of vision. But as soon as another car enters my field of vision, I have to think about slowing down. So
Mhm.
I think that the difference between what our software achieves and what you described that's achievable, with the existing tools, is that we really focus on the visual input, and the
Mhm.
microphone can be off and the camera can be off, but by sharing what you're working on and sharing it in a way that your colleagues can actually see it,
Mhm.
they absorb it in an effortless way, and it does contribute to their it contributes to the esprit de corps and the sense of trust that is built with your colleagues when you see them, and that even though you're not working with them directly, they're there and you're working on the same toward the same big goals, even though
Mhm.
you're not working together at that moment. You're still on the same team working toward the same big set of goals. That's the difference.
Okay, and I can see how that would be especially helpful for all remote companies. Now,
Yeah.
all remote teams. How do you integrate hybrid work, meaning sometime in the office, sometime at home with the Frameable tool? Like, what kind
Yeah.
of things do you do on Frameable? What kind of things do you do at home,
Yeah. So
at
you're
work?
absolutely right. So our company is totally remote,
Mhm.
but you don't have to be 100% remote to use our products. One of the ways that people use our products to support a hybrid work experience is that if they have a certain location or a certain name for a certain floor of their building, or a name for a certain project room or conference room, they can create a corollary virtual version of those things. So if you have a conference room called Market Street Conference Room, right after the street in San Francisco, then you could have people in person going to the Market Street conference room that day to work on something. And you could also have in our space a Market Street conference room in our software. So people who are in the physical office could be visible inside that same
Oh,
conference room
interesting. Okay.
that people at home are in. So the people at home would again have this reinforced feeling that they are they are present in the space where the work is getting done. It's just some people are in the physical space with a virtual footprint, and other people are just in the virtual space. But they can be named the same thing. They can have the same colors. You can do something to the design of the room that mimics the design of the physical room. So there are things you can do to sort of tie it all together.
Okay. And as you know well, there are a number of competitors coming out with, let's say, Google Hologram and the Meta virtual,
Mhm.
the virtual reality, augmented
Mhm.
reality. What do you think will be the future in terms of how people collaborate in these virtual spaces, because they are competing with what you are trying to offer? So what
Yeah.
are the distinct benefits of what you offer versus what they offer?
Yeah. So that's an easy question that I love to answer. The first reason, I mean, I'm skeptical over the near and long term that people are interested in working all day using visual wearable
Mhm.
hardware. So, I mean, what you're wearing right now, just an earpiece, I think is probably the limit of what people want to do all day, every day. Of course, there are call centers and places where people
Sure.
will do it, but But in terms of like visual, augmented, or virtual reality, where you require headsets, I do not personally believe that people want to work with that kind of hardware on all the time. That's the first thing. The second thing is that hardware is expensive and it requires, significant amounts of bandwidth. So therefore, any sort of long-term work solution that does require new hardware, especially like visually augmented, realities or virtual realities that require the hardware, are not going to be, equally accessible, or we could say inclusive, across the whole workforce. So, yeah, wealthy tech companies can afford to buy that kind of hardware for their employees, but is that going to become like a mainstream part of people's work across the entire workforce of the United States? Like, it's hard to see when the hardware, not only is it uncomfortable to wear, but also for long periods of time, but also it's expensive. And I think those two things alone are gonna really decrease adoption for anything other than holiday parties, novelty. Maybe, I can see people trying things like that and using it for, orientations possibly, and things like that. But just as an open-ended commitment to the way a job is done, it's just very, very hard to believe that it's going to be adopted wide scale anytime soon. That's the second set of reasons have to do with the aesthetics. I mean, of what's being presented. I mean, 3D is neat, and there are movies that are coming out in 3D, and in the gaming world, it's obviously quite advanced. But do we really think that people want to work all day interacting with holograms and rendered fake bodies of their colleagues and vendors and customers? Like, again, it just seems like it's interesting as a novelty, but it doesn't seem like it's in the mainstream demand for what people want to do all day, every day.
Okay, fair enough. I see what you're coming from. Now, you're in the space, you're looking at new tools that are being offered. At the same time, we're facing this return to work drive by many, many leaders, which can potentially lead to a lot of these tools not being used.
Yeah.
And the question that I want to ask you is, what are you seeing and thinking about the return to office debate?
Yeah.
Is it going to be the case that, I was looking at the latest numbers, maybe the occupancy rate is in 10 major cities, is the latest I saw was around 49% or something like that. And so I'm curious what your forecast is to be for, let's say, a year from now. Will people be working in the office more? Will people be working in the office less? Will people be working in the office the same? Given that there's increasing availability of new tools like yours and other folks who are offering more abilities to work remotely in a flexible way.
Yeah. Well, I wish I knew exactly. But I do have some thoughts. They might add up to something of a prediction. I mean, what is absolutely clear is that we are not going back to 2019.
Sure.
People want more flexibility, and it's not just millennials and younger employees that want more flexibility. It's every employee. They want more flexibility in their location and in their schedule. Now, does that mean that they're guaranteed to quit if they don't get X or Y in a certain category? No. I mean, it's going to depend on the person. It's going to depend on the company. It's going to depend on the industry, and of course, at a macro level, it's going to depend on the economy, and whether or not we're already in a recession or we're entering a recession, and how long it will last. I mean, the labor market's going to be responsive to all of this, but at the very core of the expectation is this 2.5 year period where we all learned quite a lot about what needs to happen in person and cannot happen otherwise, and what is possible when people are not physically together. I believe that the C-suite in America when they say that people need to come back to work, they're not ignoring the demand that people have for this flexibility. I think what they're doing is they are making a somewhat frustrated calculation that the tool sets that currently exist, like like what we're using now, where it's just a video box next to another video box, just do not deliver the richness of in-person collaboration that an office would deliver. So when a CEO says that they want to lean into people coming back to work, part of it might be their existing real estate expenses. They don't want that to go to waste. Part of it might be that that they don't like their home life, or that they more cynical reasons that people have have speculated about or shared. But I think that mostly it's because they know that an office provides a platform for many different kinds of interactions, both scheduled and unscheduled, and that there hasn't been up until now, and for many of them, they're not aware of any kind of virtual, remote work experience that offers that same rich, textured set of interactions that the in-person experience does. So that's what we're trying to do, is put an option on the table that's a lot more like physically working together than it is a video box next to a video box. It has a lot of the familiar features of video software, but it supports a much wider spectrum of interactions. And I think that once corporate America and once these CEOs come to understand that they are right to expect more out of their tools, then we'll see more activity across the board, and then we'll see more options, and then the people who are making the decisions will be more comfortable saying, you know what, we can have more flexibility here. But just like when electric cars came out, one type of electric car is not suitable for everyone, but you need a spectrum of options to get people excited at scale. So I think that we're entering a phase where the demand is staying. COVID and the COVID, the reasons that related to COVID for this big experiment are starting to recede or are receding, but the demand remains. And now that the demand remains, the workforce is going to be able to expect that the software industry is going to come up with better alternatives than what we've been using for the last couple of years, and hopefully we're going to be a part of that set of possibilities for them.
Excellent. I think that's a great note on which to wrap up. But before we finish, is there anything else you want to share about hybrid work, remote work, that we haven't yet touched upon?
Well, we haven't talked about work culture, because work culture is something that it's often spoken of separately from tools, but I believe they're very closely connected. I believe that it's worth mentioning, or it's worth sharing with your readers and the folks watching, that highly competitive and high achieving teams in government, in the nonprofit world, in sports, in for-profit, in the university space, across every sector, they all have this commitment to be helpful to one another. Being helpful to your teammates is critical, and an explicit commitment to being helpful to your teammates and colleagues is one of the things that distinguishes high performers. So in order to be helpful, you need to be present or visible. It's a lot harder to trust that someone's going to be there to help you if you cannot see them, and if the only way you can interact with them is by scheduling. So the point I'm trying to make is that for companies that are interested in building, in committing to, and in supporting an existing culture of being helpful to one another, they are the ones that have to demand better tools, because living a remote work life through a calendar with a set of meeting links does not inspire does not inspire an employee to believe that my teammates are around to help me if I need it. And I think that's very important. So they are actually quite closely connected. The culture of helpfulness and the culture of teamwork and the visual element of your daily workflow. And that's one of the most urgent reasons why people should want better tools.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Adam. This was a great interview. And thank you very much to the listeners and watchers of this show. Again, my name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky, and this has been another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, which is sponsored by Disaster Avoidance Experts. And I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the Future of Work Consultancy. Make sure to subscribe to this show and review it on whatever channel you saw it on Amazon, on iTunes, wherever you check this out. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. In the meantime, the wisest and most profitable decisions to you, my friends.